continue to hear people discussing the danger and the insanity of this process. So I'm going to add some more context to this from what is understood here and what's been discussed with other people. So first of all, the idea that this journey is insane or that it's unbearable is in the mind. And I'm not here to dismiss this. It's real in that it is happening. You're experiencing it. But it is happening within the mind, which is part of the illusion that is being kind of played out. The world of form, including the mind, is all illusory. And the more attention is paid only to that, the more suffering there is. The more we are wrapped up in the character that we're watching playing out daily life, the more susceptible we are to a kind of insanity, the idea of insanity, when resistance is found to this character's value, or when there's a sense of kind of diminishment to that value. So when we start to look at the mind during the process of meditation, this is where it is sometimes said that meditation itself is dangerous to some people. If there is more attention paid to the thoughts without a rising of acceptance, this is a recipe for stress and resistance and the kind of declining of mental health, because the mind is trying too hard to grapple with something that it will never understand, and then it's judging itself for not understanding. And it's just all these voices in the head, which are really just the voices of people from the past who have kind of formed this mind together. So maybe you have your mom over here, your dad over here, and they're saying different things, and then your little sister's chiming in with her little critique. And all of this kind of makes up the mind. It's just this hodgepodge of beliefs. It's not who you are. So when you listen to it and you believe it, when it is believed as being the truth, then that's just more of the mind's game being played out. And this does get kind of tricky. But ultimately, what we're looking to do is increase awareness to the mind's constructs while also increasing acceptance. And this is what mindfulness is, or equanimity. To see things as they are and to welcome them all. It's like a happy neutrality. Whatever comes up, I will be happy. Accepting of all things. That is a kind of trait that emanates directly from our true nature before the mind has been programmed to resist things, to identify, to think small, to think in terms of scarcity and clinging and aversion, which are, in Buddhist terms, the root of suffering. When we let go of this clinging and aversion, so when we let go of attachment to things being any one way, that's when we can start to see things as they really are, instead of continuing to play the mind's game. Until we figure this out, it's going to look like more attention being paid to the mind without acceptance, and so that means a lot of resistance. And this resistance has its own kind of electric charge, its own energy component in the body, and so there will be manifestations of that. During this time, it does feel like you're going crazy. It's just the mind telling itself that it's going crazy based on societal constructs that have been internalized. So there are a lot of people being rather dismissive of really substantial trauma. People saying, this journey feels really terrible for me. I feel in terror all the time. And then somebody will say, oh, that's just the mind and that's not who you are. This is true. That is true. But it's not compassionate. You have to be compassionate with yourself by realizing that, or I should say, we're kind of bringing compassion into the mind's process by being willing to accept that this is where it is right now. So we're not just going to deny its existence or deny that it is ultimately true, is a better way to say that. Instead, we're going to recognize in this moment, this is what is happening, and it's okay. When we start to accept that, we're taking a different seat in the drama. We go from fully playing the character in the movie to recognizing that we're back here. We're like the director or something. We're watching it unfold. And when you hear about unity consciousness, that's just an extension of that. It is beginning to see, not only am I not the character, I am not any of the characters, but I am. I am here seeing all of this. All of these characters are like inert vehicles powered by consciousness that I am. When this is felt, that's what unity consciousness is. It's realizing I am in all of this. All of this is of me. None of it is me. So that realization at the felt level, at the experiential level, is where all this so-called insanity really starts to make sense and become true sanity. And then you realize that you've actually never been sane, or I should say the mind has never been sane. And now the mind is seen through and sanity is experienced for the first time within this experience, within this life. Until that point, there's right now especially a really pervasive tendency to dismiss the elements of experience, to try to push past them. So you ask somebody how they're doing. Well, the mind is terrible, but I'm not the mind, am I? There's a kind of dismissive nature there where the person is trying to push through the concepts rather than to feel them. So the solution to this insanity, this preoccupation with mind, is ultimately to feel everything. Maybe when you hear this, maybe when this is heard, resistance immediately comes up and says, I don't have the capacity to feel everything from my entire life. And it doesn't have to be felt all at once. The body is our tool, our dashboard for this. It is representing old hurts for them to be felt fully. It knows what it's doing. It has a wisdom of its own. When it presents these things, they are for us, not against us, not happening to us, but happening for us. It's like we're taking this human mechanism and we're cleaning it by shining the light of awareness on it. And we do that just by seeing it and not adding the stories of the mind. So just being willing to look at it. Any story of the mind is going to be in some way rooted in future or past, in time, which is an illusion. And when we are trying to either go to the future or the past, there is a resistance by mind of this moment. So any thought is a form of resistance to this moment. It's an attempt of the mind to be anywhere but here. When we're willing just to look at things exactly the way they are without any commentary. That is consciousness. That is a trait that emanates from our true nature. That is us returning to our true nature by being willing to do that. So we start taking a different seat. When we start taking a different seat, you may notice that bliss comes up, wisdom starts to come through. You get these downloads of information, start having epiphanies. You start having these really strong kind of gut feelings about what's right for you. And then you act, well, the character acts through it. And things get kind of cleaned up. But also in that time, the mind can try to fight back with a vengeance. And that can feel really insane. We have to be willing to go through this process to become kind of reunited. We never left who we are, but it's like there's the experience of seeming to be reunited with our true self. We have to want that more than we want the world, more than we want to be sort of acceptable in the eyes of others and to be seemingly loved by others. More than all of that, we have to want to be reunited with the love that we are. This is really hard. This has been obscured throughout this entire lifetime. We are unlikely to remember what it felt like to be a 2-year-old and to be completely bathed in this love. But when it does start to come through, when bliss is understood, when it is felt, then it becomes easier because there's a baseline of understanding of what is being worked toward. This understanding is not held in the mind. In fact, it will tend to be experienced that when attention is placed back into the mind, there's a kind of amnesia. The mind is actively obscuring what is true to extend its time in the sun, let's say, its time with attention placed on all of it. If you think of it as its own kind of entity in this illusory world, wanting to stick around, it's not an enemy. It's just this kind of thing that doesn't know what's really going on. And based on its limited knowing, it's going to act in very predictable ways, like a computer, like a program. The Matrix is worth a rewatch for sure. So if we can get through this process of, and this may not happen for everybody, but this process where the mind is seemingly kind of fighting back with a vengeance, and we learn to weather these storms, and we take the seat of consciousness more and more, there's a innate confidence, a knowing that all is ultimately well. Maybe not relatively, maybe not in this situation that is just around us, but knowing that what's happening outside does not affect who we really are at our core, in our essence. This gets dicey. There are, as I've said, so many people who are trying to dismiss the relative safety of the human and saying, oh yeah, maybe you'll go crazy, but whatever, because all is well. We do need to infuse compassion into this work. We have to understand that everyone only understands from where they are. This is not being said to be condescending. This is not being said from superiority. We are one. Consciousness has kind of inserted itself into all these different forms. Really, that is reductive. It is everywhere all the time. But there are these illusory boundaries, ultimately not real boundaries, that are allowing the game of separateness to be played. Consciousness is never separated from itself. There is only one, but there's the appearance of many, and it's really compelling, and we get sucked up into it. But ultimately, consciousness is enjoying this game. It's experiencing what it is not. And in contrast, gets to continue to be kind of reunited with itself and to understand its own wholeness. It experiences separateness and fragmentation and insanity. This game is meant to take consciousness on a ride of everything that it's not. So all these bad things that are happening that we're really trying to avoid, consciousness welcomes. When we take the seat of consciousness, then we welcome them. And in that is paradoxical. I understand it's confusing to the mind, but in that we do reunite or experience a kind of reuniting. We never left. We never left it. So if there's a sense of real mental health decline that needs to be addressed within the relative sense of things, do that. We can't try to spiritual our problems away. Ultimately, the problems are all illusory. But if the mind is so bogged down with its own constructs that messages can't be heard, we have to address that. In this case, and within my book, I talk about taking the direct path and the indirect path at the same time. We're not pushing this. We're not just trying to force something through. We're not comparing ourselves to others who had an immediate awakening or who picked up these ideas really quickly. Different souls, as we'll call them, are having different experiences, and they're in different places in their soul journey. So you can't expect for two bodies coming through life to just be running the same race. They're all different races with kind of different memories, let's say, embedded into the soul level of that, different experiences that have already been had. But it is ultimately all one. It's consciousness playing the game of souls, which are playing the game of form, human form. And we can't force any of this to run its course. I know on the outside, in the appearance of things, it looks like things are really deteriorating. And a lot of us have this really strong sense of urgency to reach some point of realization as quickly as possible. But ultimately, this does require ease. Even if we're in the middle of this, and we're having all these symptoms and all these things are coming up, maybe from Kundalini rising or from excess prana of the body, preparing for that process, which is another video. Even if we're going through that and there's this sense of great urgency, we can, in the midst of that, allow ourselves space. So as I've said previously, don't listen to anyone else. Do not take what anyone else says as the complete truth. This is your journey. You know where you need to be. You know how to address it. It just requires listening to your inner wisdom, which requires dropping the idea that anyone outside of you is any authority. To me, the most straightforward way to be on this journey, when there is a sense of, is this even for me, is to work with beliefs. Dropping beliefs is the most sane, most straightforward thing you can do. If a feeling of insanity comes up with that, it's so easy to recognize that the sense of the constructed self is weakening, and of course it's going to create an energetic shift in the body. And just, it's that simple. It's not, am I dabbling in something really crazy? You're dropping what's false. That's it. So you can start with that. Start working with dropping what's false. See what comes through. Begin to weather it with acceptance. And then you can work with the pointers and the inner resonance as the mind is already weakening to the point that these messages can get through.